welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio, and this is Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C., recording the program here on April 16th and looking back on the events of the past week. Let me point immediately to an anniversary that was not marked, and it's the death of Franklin D. Roosevelt on the 12th of April, 1945, so 65 years ago this past week. Roosevelt died, a catastrophic event changing the direction of the United States from essentially a U.S. nationalist and economic development perspective towards the rest of the world to that of a contemptible puppet. And the contemptible puppet, of course, is the former Ku Klux Klansman and corrupt, indictable politician Harry S. Truman, who then essentially took over the government and carried out the orders of W. Averell Harriman of Brown Brothers Harriman, Dean Acheson, George Marshall, Dean Rusk, and others, including during the Korean War. So it's a catastrophic turning point, and it's something that we're suffering from ever since. I would also point to the role of Harry Hopkins. Right? Today we have probably 20% unemployed and underemployed easily, and we're told by Obama that we might be able to have several million jobs over a number of years. Well, with Harry Hopkins and the Civic Works Administration, CWA, we had the creation of 4.3 million jobs in 2 months. And those were productive jobs. If you look across the United States, the public libraries, city halls, bridges, roads, sewage systems, and other important works of infrastructure, many of them still go back to Civic Works Administration and then to Works Progress Administration, PWA, which was, PWPA, which was then the vehicle for about 8 million other jobs. And at the same time, parallel to this, you had other more capital-intensive efforts going on through Public Works Administration under Harold Ickes, building things like the Triborough Bridge in New York City, and, of course, the Tennessee Valley Authority, creating these huge hydroelectric flood control complexes in the Tennessee River Valley, and then imitated in other river valleys, such that by the time the U.S. had to engage in nuclear research, just the Tennessee Valley Authority produced more electricity than the entirety of Germany, a tremendous economic and then military advantage. So the degenerate leadership we have today is not interested in this. We just we'll get to this later in the program, but the abolition of the space program, the ultimate insult to the memory of Kennedy and to the efforts of NASA over the past 40, 50 years, this could not have been more evident in the insolent and cynical and, I would say, nihilistic visit by Obama to Cape Kennedy and the Florida spaceflight complex. Anyway, Roosevelt dead 65 years ago this week, and notice this has not been marked. Nothing that I've seen about it. And Harry Hopkins is out there in a virtually unmarked grave in Grinnell, Iowa, while we're getting airports named after Ronald Reagan, who carried out the great U-turn in American politics. Somebody who massively distributed wealth from the working people and the middle class to the rich and the super rich, and because he was an effective actor, got away with it, duping people left and right. The issues are still the same. The news this morning is the Wall Street jackals, the hedge fund hyenas, the asset strippers, the speculators. They're at it again, and the story now is the Securities and Exchange Commission, thank God it was put into existence under Franklin D. Roosevelt, has now come in with a civil suit for civil fraud against Goldman Sachs. And this, I think, is, to some extent, it's window dressing, but it might be the beginning of something bigger. So don't sit back and say it's just window dressing. Get ready to follow this story and make something out of it. This involves a guy called Gupta, a director of Goldman Sachs. Rajat Gupta, member of the board of directors of Goldman Sachs. We see him pictured in the Wall Street Journal this week while he's visiting the World Economic Forum in Davos. So he is a top hedge fund hyena and asset stripper. And the story seems to be, based on the first reports that we've seen, because the actual suit, not even an indictment, it's just a civil suit, but it's still a step in the right direction. This was brought in this morning. So it's a conspiracy, and here we have Gupta consorting with whom? Well, with this guy, Rajaratnam, and we've seen his, we've talked about him in the past. This is Galleon. So Rajaratnam, we can call him Roger the Rat, okay? Roger the Rat of Galleon, consorting with Rajat. Man, too many Rajas here. The British Raj has left its trace everywhere. Rajat Gupta, director of Goldman Sachs, is in a conspiracy with Roger the Rat, Rajaratnam of Galleon, one of the hedge fund operations, and also with Paulson and Company. This is not Henry Paulson, the Bush Treasury boss and the originator of the monstrous and criminal $700 billion bailout of Wall Street speculators and public menaces. But it's other Paulson, and they are also prominently mentioned in this. And the charge is that what Goldman Sachs was doing was issuing subprime mortgage-based derivatives. In other words, derivatives that were structured notes that contained subprime mortgage paper and other kinds of paper, and was issuing them, selling them to gullible customers, while at the same time Goldman Sachs was shorting it. So they were shorting the same thing that they were selling. And that's the charge. So this has caused a certain stir in Wall Street. The Dow is down 150 points at some point this afternoon, early, around noon. And Goldman Sachs has gone down 10%. So the seamless political cover for Goldman Sachs that they thought they had bought by getting their puppet Obama into the White House with a crew of other puppets, Tiny Tim Geithner, Larry Summers, Paul Adolph Volcker, Ben Bernanke, and others, all of these clowns have not sufficed to prevent the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, an independent agency, from doing something, some even symbolic step. And the CNBC has been filled with dire commentaries. It's time to short the entire financial sector and stay short until the middle of the summer, right? Various options traders coming on telling you what to do. This, of course, is just a tiny fragment of what Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, J.P. Morgan Chase, Citibank, Wells Fargo, Bank of New York Mellon, all the rest of them have been doing. And it points up. It's simply a tiny window into what's going on. Now, this is connected, undoubtedly, the timing of it is related to a fairly significant political struggle about derivatives regulation, meaning should there be any? And the Republican position is that there should be no derivatives regulation whatsoever. So we'll be back in a minute to tell you all about derivatives, probably the greatest menace to our civilization, and how at least to begin doing something against derivatives.